folks, welcome to another episode of Film Study. We're back for part two to talk about this defense. And a fine defense it was in the 22-19 loss to the Colts. Obviously, the offense let the team down in some ways, but a great defensive effort. Here to join me to talk about that is Melissa Kim. Melissa, how you doing?
Great. Lovely. Thanks so much for having me.
We had a great time in the first episode talking about a number of things. I really love the great stories you bring, particularly those about relationships on the team and what's going on. I encourage people to go download that, give that a listen. I think you'll enjoy listening to what Melissa has to say about that and about the game in general, obviously, and what it was like to be there on Sunday. The second part of this show, we talk about individual player performances, and the format is you pick a player and talk about them, and then I'll respond to that. Please lead us off.
All right. I think my MVP of this game, it has to go to Kyle Hamilton. I think that that's pretty universal across the board, maybe even on the whole team, not just on the defense. Obviously, with 3 sacks, making history again. And this is a guy that I've been a pretty big fan of just from a cultural standpoint because he is half Korean. His mother's from South Korea. His father is Black. And he made history actually when he was drafted because he's the first Korean American player that this franchise has ever drafted. And I think because of that, we had a little bit of a cultural inherent relationship when he first got to the team. Just from a cultural standpoint, there's a lot of respect that goes to older people. So from like an older sister, like younger brother, maybe kind of relationship is like what we have a little bit of as well. Because he told me he could speak some Korean for sure too. His mom is actually caught it. I've talked to me about where the best Korean restaurants are or Korean markets are in Baltimore. So if you have a suggestion, definitely send it over to Kyle Hamilton. But yeah, one of the things I've really loved about him is that he has really owned up to any, rookie mistakes or errors or constructive criticism that he has come across. And I think part of that too, again, going back to a little bit of the cultural thing that he's talked to me about before, is that from a Korean culture standpoint, it does come from a culture of where your parents are a little bit tougher on you, right? In terms of expectations, because you're not just doing things for yourself, but for the people that brought you to this country, right? His mom is from South Korea, his grandma as well. And so I think that really
you have to live. They get to live vicariously through you,
right? In that way, it's so funny because I remember asking him last year. I was like, "You're so good at owning your mistakes. Like, why?" He's like, "Well, Melissa, like as you know, we have Asian moms and whatever." And so he definitely identified with each other a lot. And when he was talking to me about going back to Notre Dame in the off season to continue to work on his degree. And I was like, wow, you're literally going back for the spring semester. Why? And he's like, well, we have Korean moms, Melissa. We have to go back and get our degrees. And I was like, okay, I get it. I know that he can't always say it to everybody, but it's been nice for me as well, because there are very few Korean American, literally no Korean American women, doing this job, covering football. So very few of them at least. And so we kind of have that. It's kind of been nice to have that like little relationship with him where we kind of identify with each other from our cultural background. That's not, I know it has nothing to do with football really, but it's gone into how he's developed as a player.
Okay. So I just a small definitional thing, because I actually want to know Tiger moms,
yes,
oftentimes Asian in general, and they push their kids to succeed in every possible way.
Yes, that's kind of, I think it was a New York Times article, probably a decade or so ago. That's where the phrase came from. It's so funny because I had the first one-on-one sit down with him when he came to town, and we did a story on Asian American Heritage Month because it was during right after the draft in May last year. And it's so funny because he went to Notre Dame, I went to Hopkins, like both obviously really great schools, but we have brothers that went to UPenn, and it's every Korean mother's dream to have their kid go to an Ivy League or Harvard, Princeton, whatever. And we were like, yeah, we're both the failures of the family because we went to Notre Dame and Hopkins, and we both felt that because he was like, we both were talking about how we had brothers. He's like, oh, where'd your brother go to school? And I was like, Penn. And he's like, I was like, what about yours? He's like, oh my God, Penn. And he was like, oh my God, we're so bad. We're such failures in life and what we're doing. So it's been pretty neat to have that kind of relationship with him, obviously. But again, it goes into how his development has been as a football player and as a human being. You think about, he was 20 years old when he was drafted. Like last year when he turned 21, I was like, oh my God, what'd you do for your 21st birthday? He's like, I just like went to the liquor store and bought a beer to say that I could. And he's like, I don't even like beer. And that was kind of it. You know what I mean? So great kid. I think character is like on point. And, again, as the Tiger mom saying goes, there's no way that he's ever going to be able to put a toe out of line because sure, there's fines and whatever the law, but I promise you the Korean mother will strike more fear into his heart than anything else that could ever consequence that could come his way.
That is very cool. That is very cool. Definitely, Hamilton had one of the best ever games by a Ravens defensive back in this game, and that is an incredibly high standard for a team that's had Ed Reed playing here. Mm-hmm. Jim Leonard, I know you're a fan of him in the game at Tennessee in 2008 was a fantastic postseason game, but Ed Reed had a number of multiple interception games. But if I'm going to limit it strictly down to the nickel in particular, mm-hmm. there's one game that I would nominate to compete with Kyle Hamilton for the best game ever played by a nickel. And that was by Corey Ivy in 2006 in the 27-0 win over the Steelers at home. Ivy in that game, 3 passes defensed, included 1 interception. And one of the big highlights from that game is a strip sack that he actually had coming off the edge that Adalys Thomas scooped up and ran into the end zone for the score that put him up 24-0 right after halftime. And that game had everything from Corey Ivy. He was all over the field. Kyle Hamilton in this one, very much similar. He actually rushed the passer 12 times in this game. 6 of them were disguised as off-ball blitzes. 5 of those he delivered some sort of pressure event, including 3 sacks. And he had one other pressure among 6 undisguised rushes. But I thought it was just one of the most astounding performances I've ever seen from really any Ravens defender, but certainly from a Ravens nickel.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that we've only scratched the surface of what Kyle Hamilton can do. He's only in his second year, 21-year-old kid, essentially. So I think that he's got a lot more ahead of him on this team, especially with this defense. And when you hear Mike Macdonald talk about Kyle too, it's like he is so excited about the potential of what he can do. So I think that with Mike Macdonald being, as quote unquote young for defensive coordinator, whatever you mm-hmm. want to call it, as he is, the relationships that he has with these guys, I think, you identify a little bit more in that sense because you are so close in age. And a lot of these defensive coaches actually, too, like think about Zach Orr, you know what I mean? Like, I think the age difference or the lack of age difference, I think helps out a lot in this sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you mentioned Zach Orr, very relatable coach because he's young. And you know what? I mean, that shouldn't maybe matter. Maybe it should be that Dallas Sanders should be able to see eye to eye with every offensive lineman. And there's some ways.
He does, though. Joe
he does.
Okay, Jody's such a boss. I'm obsessed with him because here's this 69, 70-year-old man who's out there and we make a joke sometimes. So on Fridays, we definitely always watch the O-line at practice because we're on the far field 3. And so we always joke that if you cut everybody off from the knees down, you wouldn't be able to tell if Joe DeLaSanders is a coach or a player because his calves are massive. He obviously still works out. And I think someone was saying that they ran into him in the hallway once. He was carrying little cupcakes for everyone to give out to the players and stuff like that. And he's just the sweetest, nicest man. I mean, credit to him that he's doing this still. Amazing feat.
He's got a lot more time doing it too.
Oh,
he's if you go to camp, just try watching the offensive line for a while because Dallas Sanders is an old school teacher. He goes mm-hmm. one rep at a time and he builds it up from just a portion of the line up to usually only 3, just half line drills where he has a couple guys standing on the outside being defenders. It's very, very well put together. He's very big into exactly how your feet are being placed and taking your first step, shifting your weight and using your hands. He's all about those very technical details. And he gets right in there, pushes you out of the way and takes the rep for you to kind of show you how to do it. It's great stuff.
It's so fun to watch. And I mean, and don't get me, just because he's an older gentleman, he does not let up on those guys at all. I've seen him say words that I probably would never say to my mother to these guys, and he does not let up on them. But the guy, I mean, how can you not love this guy? How can you not love being coached by this guy? Because he's essentially a legend, Yeah.
He is just great in terms of the Ravens offensive line development. He's all about it. I don't even know if he's really the scheme guy for the Ravens run game or if he ever really has been. He's a technician in terms of exactly how to teach offensive linemen, but it's been remarkable to watch him. Yeah. I did want to go back to your earlier comment about Zach Orr, though, being relatable. Mm-hmm. And you know that Zach Orr has shared a lot of these childhood experiences, and it doesn't necessarily always matter, but when you've seen the same movies and you understand the same music, you can use those as analogies and you get that. And the time I saw it really not work was, I forget if it was a linebackers coach or a defensive coach or whatever, but it was one of the ones on Hard Knocks and it wasn't the Ravens. So he basically said, Yoda, he says, do or do not, but there is no try. And some people my age understand that reference, and people who are 20 years old, they've never seen Star Wars.
That's true. No, that's so true. You think about those cultural like references and stuff like that now too, because like you think about. Oh, I'm gonna go back to Kyle Hamilton for a second. He was like born after 9/11, and you're just like, what? Like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like that's I don't feel like I'm like that old, but that definitely makes me feel old too. You know what I mean? Those cultural references because I was talking to somebody the other day too, like in that age range, and they didn't know who Oprah was, and I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't know who Oprah was? But you think about it, those kids have never watched Oprah on TV because she was off the air before they watched TV. You know what I mean? So, oh yeah.
She came through
Sage.
Baltimore originally,
Yes,
so she's
right.
a big deal here.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the only other thing I kind of want to hit on with Hamilton before we move on is where do you keep him the rest of the year? Do you keep him at slot corner given how well he played in this game, or do you move him back to safety? How do you deal with that?
I think it's going to depend on who else is on the field, honestly, because in terms of personnel and who else they have available, because obviously he's proven that he can, go back to he can obviously play safety, he can play at the slot. I think it's just going to depend on Gino, Marcus, these other guys that have injuries. Are they going to be able to come back, or are they going to have to shift? I think it's really going to depend on who comes off the end, or Marlon Humphrey for crying out loud. Yeah, I mean it's going to depend on who is going to be back with the team and healthy and able to play.
Well, the good news is he's one of those guys who's good enough that you can move him around and hopefully not mess him up. And we kind of had that discussion on the first show about what really matters. And if you have great players, you can move them around a lot. If you have Michael Orr, Camelot Correa, it's harder because they're more marginal players for the NFL. So it's a more difficult thing to get that to work out. Yeah. All right, we'll move on. If it's okay with you, I'll bring up my next guy up. I'll talk about Michael Pierce a little bit. Now, Michael Pierce did not have a big splashy look in this game, and some of the things you'll remember about him were things that weren't necessarily very great. For instance, he missed a sack that later got turned into a 2-yard sack. He missed a second sack where Minshew got rid of the ball in the end zone, and he didn't have the Minshew's right arm pinned, which allowed him to kind of shot put the ball out of there enough in the direction of a wide receiver that it wasn't intentional grounding. And that was on the play before the safety. The safety could have come a play earlier there. It didn't turn out to be, a pivotal play in the game, but unfortunately didn't convert the sack here. He had a tremendous impact on the run plays, and in particularly on the 4th and 1, he stood up to Nelson and French in a double team in a way you wouldn't expect to happen, and actually pushed them back slightly while all of the bypassers, I will call them, on the outside were rushing in to make the play, including Brandon Stevens, who ultimately did, Patrick Queen, who had the front side blocked off. Really impressive game for Michael Pierce. I have him for 4 pressures in the game, and one of his best games, I think, as a Raven, including the first trip as well. So just extremely impressed with what he did in this game.
Yeah, Michael Pierce. I talked a little about him in part 1 and his relationship with Brett Urban. Obviously, one of those guys that is a veteran that can bring that veteran experience, I think, and veteran mojo to that D line, especially because you think about what they lost. Right, they lost Calais Campbell, who was such a big part of this defense, a big part of this team, and so now they're looking at a leader, and I think Michael Pierce has become one of those guys for sure because, he is a veteran. And I spoke to him during training camp in a one-on-one situation. And we talked, like when I do these one-on-ones, guys, like obviously I want to talk football and like, what's going right, what's going wrong, but also like, what else are you doing in life a little bit, like what happened in your life and things like that and your relationships with other guys. So the one thing that I love about the D-line overall is that in order to learn the plays, they play Jeopardy. So apparently it's like an ongoing tradition or something like that. Yeah. Oh yeah. This is something I found out last year. And like Calais, they get like really into it. Like it's a serious deal. Like Calais is like, he told me every week what the score, like on Fridays in the locker room, I would always go talk to Calais. So it would be like, we just, not even like in an interview format. We just like talk about like, what's going on with turf fields, about like soccer, about like life, like whatever. And so I would always like get an update like on the Jeopardy score with him on Fridays. And so, it apparently gets really intense, which you would imagine. I mean, these guys, they compete over a Connect Four, yes. Like Roquan, you know what I mean? If you guys have seen those videos, actually, as an aside, if you follow Roquan on Instagram, he would always post like when he beat someone, and he would be like, "Another victim, and got another one." It'd be like, "Poor Kyle Hamilton, like poor Patrick Queen, poor Gino, like whoever it was." But then I talked to Delshawn Phillips like 2 weeks ago, and he was like, "No," he's like, "That's actually crap," because he's like, the record. He's like, "My record." He's like, "I'll show you on my phone. The record right now is 13-2." He's like, "I'm 13 and Roquan is 2." You see, he never puts his losses on Instagram because he wants everyone to think he's a winner. So just FYI. So, but the thing is, these guys get competitive.
That's 13-2 at Connect Four.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They keep score. They keep records at Connect Four. They are competitive about everything, and obviously even Jeopardy, in terms of learning the plays for the D line. And so I asked both Michael Pierce and Brent Urban this year about Jeopardy, and what they're doing with that. But yeah, go ahead.
So in 1996, I met my wife, and she and I were instantly incredibly competitive with each other. This is a lot less interesting than Roquan Smith and
no, please.
But we kept a sheet of every game we played, and it only took about 2 months for one of us to become very tired of that.
I
won't say who.
Was it because somebody else was winning all the time?
Well, there was probably some of that, but we still really enjoy our games, and whenever we can get together for a game night, we always do that. But I understand that Ryan Mink apparently plays games and has played some with the Ravens, and he told me that he used to play with John Urschel. And I would think that would be very, very challenging because he was a very smart guy and whatnot, but like to play games apparently quite a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think any of those guys, when you're at that level, or like just in general, I mean, I think we're all by human nature, like most of us are very competitive, like if we played a sport or like whatever. But yeah, so I guess this year, apparently they've like split. They used to have like 2 teams for the D line and playing Jeopardy, but now they have like pairs, and obviously.
What are the nature of the Jeopardy questions? Going to be anything world history, whatever, or is it all?
Oh, no. It's just about the plays to learn, like,
that's good.
Kind of learn the play. Like that's the important part of it, I suppose. But I was asking him a little bit too, like, who's stepping up in the leadership role now. And, he said himself, obviously Broderick Washington, Justin Matabike, definitely the leaders in that room. So it's like definitely cool to see Michael Pierce to, get recognized. Because like I feel like that, those D-line, O-line, those positions, unless you make a mistake, you don't really hear about them, right? Unless you like covered or blow a play or something like that. But yeah, I think that him and Brent Urban together, they're such a little. Apparently, Chuck Smith calls them the fun bunch. So those two together, they just try to keep everything like really light and fun. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, when you think about it, like we take football so seriously sometimes, but it generally it's a kid's game that that they're being paid to play is what some of them have said to me in the past to offer you some perspective there. But yeah.
Getting back to Pierce for a second, playing with tremendous leverage this year. The pad level is fantastic and really doing a great job of standing up to doubles that might have moved him in past years. I think he's really playing at a higher level, and that's saying a lot because Pierce, his brief time last year and his first tour with the Ravens, was an outstanding run defender. He's making his presence felt as a pass rusher this time. Do you get a sense? I know Chuck Smith was brought in more to teach the edge rushers some new tricks, and particularly some compound moves. I think I saw a little bit at camp of those interior guys also doing some hand placement drills as well.
Oh yeah, no, that's the fun stuff to watch. I think for sure. I think, as we've kind of said about a couple of guys on the show already, about Brandon Stevens, Kyle Hamilton, as the more versatile that you can be, the more valuable you are going to be to a team. And one of the things that really stood out about Michael Pierce when I talked to him during camp that I'm like now remembering is that he just seemed a little bit like lighter, like, you know what I mean? Like a happy one, like in terms of like his attitude and stuff like that. And I was like, why are you so light this year? I was like, I feel like you're a little bit lighter. And he's like, honestly, I think he said, I'm going into year 8. My season got cut short last year, or 2 seasons cut short rather, due to injury. And he's like, I'm really just trying to enjoy every single moment, just be grateful and thankful for every day. And you can say that sounds cheesy, a little woo-woo, like whatever you want. But at the end of the day, like they know that this is a very limited time that you get to play in the NFL. And so instead of being stressed about like, oh my gosh, like he's just really being grateful for it.
He and Brent Urban are kind of in maybe a similar position. I mean, first of all, if Pierce plays well this year, he could still get signed somewhere, but people are going to be leery with his size that things are going to go south in a hurry. So he's probably does not have another multi-year contract left, I would think. Urban definitely is an NFL survivor at this point. He probably would play for the Ravens or almost nobody else next year. I asked him because I know he's from the Toronto area, and pretty
Yeah.
much if you're Canadian, everybody's from the Toronto area more or less. But no, I'm just kidding. There's a lot of little communities there that all seem to be, the homes of various CFL teams. And, whether it was the Hamilton Tiger Cats who owned his rights originally or Toronto, would he like to play there in the Canadian Football League for a year? And he said, well, I thought about it at one point and going back and trying to play there in my hometown and whatnot. But he wanted to play 10 years in the NFL.
Which is pretty impressive. I mean,
next,
a decade. Yeah, that is really, really impressive. I hope, you're right about their various contract situations for sure. But great relationship. Those have a great relationship. And Urban is really, I think, starting to be that personality guy in the team too. He never is not smiling. Him and Nate Flowers always smiling. I think they're just always so happy to be there. And I don't know if you've noticed the pass deflection celebration that he does, that the herb, that if you haven't seen it, definitely pay attention the next time he deflects a pass, because the entire sideline apparently doesn't know too with him. So longevity obviously is one of the things that you want in this league. By the way, Michael Pierce apparently does hot yoga to help his mobility.
Did not know that.
So he told me that too, and I was like, do you like it? He's like, I love it. I love hot yoga. So that's encouraging. That's an encouragement to all the players and whoever else out there. Yoga, Pilates, are wonderful for your mobility and for your body in general. I'm a fitness instructor too on this as a side hustle as well. So I'm a big proponent of obviously yoga and Pilates as well. So yeah.
Very, very cool. Take us on for another player.
All right. So my let me pull up my list here. My second person or second MVP, I want to say someone we've talked about a lot as well. I'm going to put Patrick Queen in there, I think, for my second guy, because, he and Roquan led the defense with tackles in this game against the Colts. And I know that in the past 2 games this season, those two have really been, I think you noticed them a lot more, right? They were in the first game, on that 4th and 1 on the Texans' first drive, Patrick literally sent CJ Stroud to another planet. And with Roquan too, I think that regardless of even if I don't think they weren't as flashy this game, I guess is the best way I can put it. But no, I think that he and Roquan are so important. I think that I really admire how he's taking the leadership role coming into this game as well. And I think that made a difference, at the end of the day, like Lisa talked about in part 1, the communication, that part is so important, and they've talked about it, how much it's improved. But they did admit, after the game, PQ in particular, that there were some not so successful moments in terms of the communication. And he feels like, this is how the guys are leaders, right? He kind of put it on his back, that touchdown where he was in coverage on Zach. What's his last name? Moss. That's right, Moss. He put it on his back, and he said, had that touchdown not been scored, they would have won the game. But obviously, that is not why they lost the game. I think that is pretty clear at this point. But he he took ownership for it, and there was no pointing fingers. He put it on his back, and he's like, we're gonna do better. I'm gonna do better. This is not gonna happen again. So I think that he's my kind of intangible MVP of this game for sure. And I think that's why.
I'll say from a very tangible standpoint, of his 12.
With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you with fast, chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. If you're too busy this fall to cook but want to make sure you're eating well, then get Factor. This is what I did. We were moving, packed up all my dishes, everything needed better meals. I signed up for Factor. It's best meals, probably the healthiest I've eaten in a month, thanks to these Factor meals. Because with Factor, you can skip those extra trips to the grocery store and the chopping, the prepping, the cleanup, all while still getting flavor and the nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes. So all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then get back to crushing your goals, which for me was trying to move. But now I can't. I need them for work at lunch every day. They're perfect. So this September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use that code Ravens50 like I did to get 50% off. That's Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meals. Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and the brand new cash out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First 2 legs of your parlay hit? Cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at a bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boosts, same game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no strings attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.
Tackle contributions, 9 of them were defensive wins, so that's really big, meaning that's not keeping up on schedule with the yardage. I know you probably know that, but there's some people who are listening to the show who probably don't. So it's very impressive for Queen in terms of that. Didn't have a bunch of missed tackles in this game. He had a bad missed tackle the previous week. He's been a terrific coverage player generally this year, much better than in the past. Big elevation in his game. The breakdown on the 17-yard touchdown pass was really the first one. It's not an easy route to cover, but he was in just about the right position for that before he got shoved, and then he didn't quite get his head up to track the football well enough to be too much of a looming presence over a player like Moss, who's a lot shorter than him.
Yeah, and here's the thing: it's like he's someone that I've talked to like pretty regularly throughout camp and preseason and coming to this, and obviously, everyone knows like his option didn't get picked up over the summer, and I think that he definitely came into this season. Look, he could have done the whole that whatever you want to call it, right? That a lot of players around the league has done, but what I admire so much about him is that he said, at first he was mad about the whole situation when I asked him about it at that stadium practice. But he said, look, like, I know I have a lot of football ahead of me. I know that, like, I'm still young. I still got a lot I can prove. And he's like, I'm just going to go out there and prove that I can do this, And I think Zach Orr said during preseason too that you saw there was a different look in his eyes when he got to camp, when he came back this year, that he was ready to go, that he was going to fight for himself, this season. And I think he's done that, not just from like an aspect of his on the field performance, but his intangibles, his off the field stuff too.
Yeah, he's very focused on football right now. That's very clear. His game has improved in a number of ways, and it is a career. And look, sometimes, you work anywhere in business, the promotion is just not available at your company because there's somebody your age sitting in the job, and you have to decide, do I move on or do I, wait it out here? And it's everybody faces it. If you want to rise fairly far up in the corporate ranks, it's not really any different in football. And, Patrick Queen is taking the right attitude towards it, and he is going to get paid if he continues to play like this. And as Ravens fans, that's all we can really hope for, is the best season possible from Patrick Queen, a great compensatory draft pick, and hopefully a deep playoff run.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, too, is he understood when I talked to him at that stadium practice, he understood what the situation was. When he said that he was mad about it at first, but then he got over it and he realized, like, hey, like, I know that there are other people that they needed to pay. Obviously, Lamar being the big one, OBJ maybe another one, a lot of guys. And he was like, I understood the situation. So I think that that's a really mature take at age 24 to look at it like that, right? And he's someone that does listen to a lot of the noise, which is, I was like, oh my gosh, why? Because, I personally do not. I don't think it's like great for your mental health, but like whatever argument you want to make for that is fine. But, he reads everything on social media, whether it's positive, whether it's some negative. Really? And he said he likes to look at both sides and weigh out both sides because he said, he's his harshest critic, and he's like, if there's something bad that someone like says about me, he's like, it's not something that I haven't already thought about. But he's like, most people I realize they don't actually know what they're talking about, and but he's like, it's my job to be level headed. We have you know a stacked team this year. We have all the pieces. We know what we want to do. We want to win games. Everybody gets paid. Everybody gets what they want if they, go to the Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl, if they have success in this season. So I think just such a mature attitude to have when you look at this, because you look at other guys around the league who haven't, who have held out, or like whatever you want to call it, you know what I mean? And they haven't had that same attitude, that same mature attitude, like realistic attitude. So I think that is something to be very much admired about Patrick Queen.
Yeah, I think all of the Ravens who are in their contract years have done a really good job doing that. And Dobbins was the one who sort of held in for a while. I think he was kind of maybe having his arm twisted a little bit by some of the other running backs in the league on this. Not 100% sure, but the fact that they're meeting on a Zoom call would tell me that they're negotiating, trying in multiple directions. But all you got to do is look at Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb obviously did get paid before it happened, and know that, or J.K. Dobbins for that matter, and know that, a running back future is always going to kind of be in doubt. It is the nature of that game, and unfortunately of that position, that there's probably additional risk, a shorter career there. And of all the positions that the CBA doesn't work really well for, running back is one. And I think fortunately for Queen, inside linebacker is one where it actually does work reasonably well, that they have not super short careers. They don't get hurt nearly at the frequency of a lot of other positions. They're strong, tough athletes who are usually fairly thickly built and aren't, but at the same time, they're not so dependent on their, they are dependent on their legs, but they don't have the frequency of leg injuries that you get on either line from
the
getting
durability. The durability factor is there, I think, a little bit more. Yeah. So yeah, Patrick Queen is my number 2 MVP.
Oh, all right. That's a good one. I certainly can't argue with that. I was going to save that for a little bit later, but we got that. Let's talk a little bit about Roquan, since we're talking about the inside linebackers here. Also a very nice game, tied for the team lead with 12 tackles. Included half a sack, which is really nice. So he made his contributions as a pass rusher as well. 6 defensive wing amongst 12 tackles, was not quite as good as Queen did. Also had that nice pass defense off the back of his helmet early in the game.
Oh yeah,
that was a key play. I think that was a drive ending. Not sure if that ended a drive or not. No, it didn't, because it was on the next play the drive ended. But anyway, any PD for an inside linebacker is a very good thing. And Roquan stood up in coverage. One of the things that comes up a lot on this show is how much better a player he's been since he joined the Ravens. And he was a good player, but he wasn't a great player. And now he's a great player.
Oh yeah, he's definitely a standout. And I'm sure the Bears are kicking themselves now for this whole situation, because they didn't recognize how much potential he had. But to kind of bring those two together a little bit now, Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith, I think that they really do make each other better. I know there's a lot of argument of people saying like, oh, like Roquan made Patrick better, whatever. I think that they both made each other better, and they've both talked about that, honestly, in the sense that because I've asked both of them about each other. And, Roquan said this past week that, look, this is a guy that I knew about before I came here, because he's a first-round draft pick as well. And he was obviously like very talented, like when I got here too. And he's like, honestly, he makes me a better player too. And like that relationship is like what you want to see. You know what I mean? Like guys that make each other better. That's why I'm like, please don't separate them. Like, oh my gosh. But obviously business decision. But I think that those two have certainly made each other a lot better players. But yeah, there's no doubt about that they've elevated each other.
Yeah, it's no doubt about it. They've I think the structure in Baltimore has really helped Roquan Smith. So the Bears might be kicking themselves, but the Bears weren't capable of developing Roquan Smith as part of the problem. And that might be the same case with Sam Mustipher, that they really didn't have the good enough line continuity that he could become the player he might become here. Now, we can see if some of the play so far has been an illusion. Mustipher certainly was far from perfect in this last game, but I think in general, he's looked pretty good in the preseason and the regular season so far.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to what the coaches here are doing, right? And like, for him, it's kind of cool, obviously, because he's from I think the Owings Mills, Reisterstown area as well, so he's from here. But I actually talked to him as well this past week too. I've been around the locker room a lot these last couple of weeks, but he had mentioned that that coming here, having like the veteran guys to learn from, he specifically shouted out Kevin Zeitler and Morgan Moses. So again, going back to that whole notion of these older veteran guys that are really nurturing and mentoring these younger guys with experience. And I mean, not that like, Sam Usfer's been in the league for what, like, I think it's 5, 6 years, 4 years. So, I think that's so important. Those relationships are so important. I think that credit to this team, credit to the guys on this team for feeling that inherent need. Kevin Zeitler told me before he feels like an inherent need because he's a vet to really nurture and mentor these younger guys. So I think that's credit to them.
I'm glad to hear that. I hope, before he leaves, he'll have some positive impact on Voorhees. I do expect there's not going to be money to pay Zeitler next year, but Voorhees is here and hopefully is going to be in a position to take a starting role. And I hope he can do a little bit more than just rehab this season from his very significant injury, obviously.
Yeah, no, for sure.
All right.
We're on last MVP now, right? I'm on my last.
I haven't even got to MVPs yet. It's just any player you want to talk about.
Oh, sorry. Any player. Sorry, not the MVP, person that you want to talk about. Sorry. For me, also, Jadeveon Clowney. That's one that I want to talk about too, because he stood out in the sense, again, if we're going back to that theme of veteran guys helping out younger guys, he obviously felt that, I think, when he got here, because he talked a lot about Odafe Owe actually in their first time in talking to him in the locker room, in the sense that he was like, I feel like he's like a similar player that I was when I was first starting out. So he really was, talking him up quite a bit, that he's been impressed with what he's been doing. Odafe obviously didn't play this past week after he had an ankle injury in the Bengals game. Again, we saw him around the locker room in a walking boot. So we'll see kind of how that materializes. But Jadeveon Clowney, I think, has quietly obviously been filling in for the various roles that he has for Odafe. And then I think that he brings those intangibles, you know what I mean? Like, because he was a guy when the people got here, people were kind of like, oh, well, like he had his situation, we'll call it, last season, and wasn't really sure what he was going to bring to this team. But I think he's fit in quite nicely, actually, in his role here.
I don't know what the Ravens would have done without Jadeveon Clowney's pressure so far this year. He's been the one real consistency, and that outside linebacker position has been very undermanned. He's taken on a bigger snap role than I thought even wise. I thought, keeping him fresh would be good. Kind of reminds me of when Pernell McPhee was here for his second tour of duty, how much they put on his side. Pernell McPhee had played, I want to say 15 or 18 snaps per year with Washington and Chicago the 2 or 3 years previous to coming to Baltimore. So you don't figure him for being more than a situational pass rusher. And, he comes into camp, he's the Ravens' best run defender at outside linebacker, and he's probably their best pass rusher as well. And so they're trying to put him on the field as often as he can be, and he's playing over 30 snaps a game. And it only took 7 weeks for him to get hurt that year. And then next year he came back and he still played a ton of snaps. I kind of feel like Clowney needs a reduced role at this point. He's not the only one. The other guy I think who needs a reduced role, certainly from what he's been playing recently, is Justin Madubuike.
Yeah, he's been up there a lot. Yeah.
And it's not that he's not a good player. He's a terrific player. I just think he would be fresher and better as a pass rusher if he played 47% of the snaps, except instead of this week I think it might have been like 65% of the snaps. It was just an outrageous total, but I'll get that for you in just a second. But I just feel like 64 out of 84. So that's over 75% of the snaps he played in this last game. Way overused for Madubuike.
Yeah, and it goes back to kind of the theme of this day / this week has been in terms of their hands are a little bit tied right now, I think, with their injury situation. So, I mean, they're literally kind of dictating how they're, the strategy from the personnel that they had. And I think head coach John Harbaugh actually mentioned that in his Monday presser when it came to both the offense and the defense, honestly, like, in these situations. I think the question was about Lamar throwing deep, and he said, we kind of adjusted as the game went along depending on personnel. So that's going to dictate, I think, a lot of what this team does in this coming week as well.
Yeah, that is unfortunate, but they're going to be very, very shorthanded for this game against the Browns. The Browns have looked unbelievably good in 2 games and quite bad in the third. And
I'm just laughing about it because when you look at this is kind of why they say like why you play the game, like why this sport is so great because when it comes, you just never know until it comes down to the actual execution of everything you plan for. I mean, at the beginning of the season and all the preseason polls, people were throwing the Browns away and putting the Bengals up top. And I mean, we're in week 3, and the script has been flipped completely.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting to see that.
Yeah, I don't see any teams having a really easy run to the finish line here in the AFC North. And I still think any team is probably capable of putting the health together at the right time. Serious injuries abound across, obviously the Browns losing Chubb is very serious, but they still have a functioning quarterback. The Ravens, fortunately, with all their injuries, Lamar is still healthy. The Bengals obviously missing Burrow are not healthy, and they have problems. And Pittsburgh has lost Minka Fitzpatrick already. I don't know when he's going to play again. He didn't play last night, right?
No, he didn't. No, yeah. I don't think he did either. So yeah, I mean, health is such a big part of all of this. So I think that is going to dictate a lot of what happens in the division as well, obviously. So we shall see.
All right. How about we talk about Brandon Stephens?
Yeah.
So we talked about him a little bit in the first show, but actually getting his chance as a number 1 outside cornerback right now, which is just incredible to me. That's true because during the first season, during the preseason, I really thought about this is a guy you probably want as your number 5 corner on the team on the outside, and ideally, your 4th cornerback is almost always going to see some playing time. Your 5th cornerback hopefully sees less playing time, but probably also will see some. But he's a guy that just had not really proven it. Did seem to be improving slightly as the season went on. Then we get the word he's moving to safety before camp starts. Mm-hmm. Then the first day of camp, we need a slot corner. Let's move Brandon there. See what he can do.
I know. I mean, yeah, I think that speaks to the versatility factor again. I think with the same thing with Kyle Hamilton, the more positions you can play, the more valuable you're going to be. And I think he's that's really starting to prove that a lot more. Granted, I think that he had said that, he loves it all in terms of what he wants to play. A lot of these guys will just say like, I will play whatever position you want me to, where you think I'm most valuable. And he's kind of done that and kind of run away with it this season, the outside corner, because that's where they, again, as we mentioned in part 1, that's where we thought they were going to need the most depth this season. But now it seems like that they're working out okay at outside corner with him.
That's amazingly, that's one of the few positions where they actually have 3 functional players right now with Darby and Yasin both playing all right. And I think Stephens playing even a tick better. Stephens in this game did give up 2 longer plays, a 34 and a 23, but he had tight coverage on both those. We talked a little bit about that earlier, so I don't want to go over it again. But he also had 2 passes defensed, and he had 2 other drive-ending tackles, including that 4th and 1 in overtime, which is the most important play of the game. Well, no, I can't say that because the Ravens didn't win it, but it's one of the plays that gave the Ravens yet another chance to win the game, along with the safety and all the other opportunities to win this game.
Yeah, no, for sure. And one thing that I really do enjoy about him, another like story time kind of thing, is that he he's just seemed like one of those like good human guys that is just willing to like do whatever it takes to help this team. And you definitely notice that in the locker room. He's kind of in between like Pat Ricard and Odafe in the locker room. And so the Ravens locker room is like really interesting for those that haven't been in it at the Castle. I like because it makes no sense. Yeah, I liken it to like you put everybody's number like on a card and then you like throw it up in the air and where they land, like that's where they're gonna land. Some of them are very intentional, obviously. Like Ronnie Stanley is next to Tyler Huntley and Lamar, and like OBJ is next to Zay Flowers. And then this is my favorite part of the locker room because these are some of my favorite guys. Like Geno Stone, Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, and Broderick Washington are all in a row too. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see like where they all kind of land otherwise, because it seems like everyone else is a little bit random. Usually rookies are in the back, and then like when they get to be on their rookie year, they get to be, Kyle Hamilton used to be like in the back corner where Zay Flowers once was.
Are there 2 different sizes of locker, or do you want to be near the shower, or what do you want?
I don't know, actually. Actually, that's a good question to ask the guys this week. Maybe I'll ask them that. Like, what is like the most like MVP like place to be in the locker room? I guess you would have to say it's like by Lamar, right? I don't know. Lamar's also by like Is
there a better position for the TVs or anything else in the room?
No. Well, there's like so there's a basketball hoop that's like right by it was like formerly where James Crochet was. Rock Ya-Sin is near the, it's Rock Ya-Sin, Tyler Huntley, Lamar, and then Ronnie Stanley, I want to say. And there's like a basketball hoop right next to them. So I guess that's an optimal place. But new this year, so if you've heard any of the locker room interviews this year on television or on the radio or anything like that, or on any blogs, and you hear like these like noises of like things like dropping. So there's cornhole that they brought into the locker room. It's right by where you walk into the entrance. So if you're not careful walking around, you could get hit in the face with a cornhole bag, just FYI. But yeah, that's kind of like by that stretch where those defensive guys I named earlier that I love that were there, and then Nelson Aguilar is kind of there too, and like in the corners of that end of that line is like Justin Tucker, Kevin Zeitler, Tyus Bowser, and like Devin Duvernay, those guys there. So yeah, the in locker room game thing is like definitely a thing there. Yeah, I mean Brandon Stevens, because like Brandon Stevens is by Pat Ricard. I was like, in what world does this make sense? Because in the past locker rooms I've been in, they've always been, the Packers and the Patriots at least, they've been organized by position. Obviously, you want the quarterbacks together, you want whatever position together. But yeah.
Did the Packers still have their Settlers of Catan regular game going when you were there?
They did not. I don't remember seeing that actually.
It's been in.
I know what it is.
All economics, The Economist. That's where I saw it.
Okay. Yeah. No, they didn't have that in there. I don't know. They definitely didn't. Yeah. I don't remember. There wasn't a lot of like a long time like spent in the locker room there. They didn't like. The Ravens, like, what's so interesting about them is like some of them, like, they do kind of like hang out in the locker room for a little bit and like, you know, chat and catch up and like whatever. Yeah, I don't remember seeing that in there, but I heard about that. I think I did hear about that for the Packers.
All right.
I was gonna say, what were we talking about?
We were talking about Brandon Stevens.
Yeah,
that's
Brandon
okay.
Stevens, yeah.
Anybody else you'd like to talk about?
No, I think that those were kind of like the main guys for this week. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I didn't really get a chance to respond on Clowney, probably because I did do it, but I did want to say Clowney's. Oh no, I did. 4 pressures in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Again, 4 pressure events. 2 of them are pressures, 1 quarterback hit and 1 half a sack. He's been the one constant there, and it's really nice. He had a couple other that PFF scored, by the way. What those were later pressures. He doesn't get credit for that from me for those because they're after 3 seconds. But I just want to explain why this difference occurs to any listener who might be wondering why they had him for more. But anyway, Clowney's presence has been enormous for this team. I don't know what the team would have done without him.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure.
Real quick, 3, 2, 1 on MVPs. I think you might have said already, but who's your
I accidentally did. Sorry, I totally didn't realize what we were doing organizational wise. Okay, so number 1 obviously goes to Kyle Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
I think that goes without saying. Number 2, Patrick Queen, and I would say number 3, Brandon Stevens.
Okay, good choices. I wouldn't disagree with anyone, and those 2 are on my honorable mention list. I have Hamilton at number 1, Pierce at number 2. I thought just at a monster game, and Roquan Smith at number 3. But I can honestly see see any reason to order those 5 in any way that includes Kyle Hamilton at number 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. Well, Melissa, we'll call it there, and we really appreciate you coming on the show and taking all this time to talk football and have these great stories about the inner workings of the Ravens organization. Some of these relationships is just great to hear. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Sure. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Threads now too. Apparently, or X, whatever we're calling it now, social media. I'm Melissa Y. Kim on all of the platforms, all of the mediums, so you can find me there. Hit me up.
Okay, Melissa Y. Kim, and you're on Friday night on Game Day Flockdown. Game Day Flockdown, yeah, right?
Yes. Yeah, Game Day Flockdown on the Fan, yep. And then also post-game on Sundays after the game as well.
Is that on the Fan or is that on
That's on the Fan as well, yeah.
Okay, great. 105.7 also. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Kim. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. This is how I find new content a lot of times and new people to share the discussion of what's going on with the Baltimore Ravens. So please hit me up there. Always appreciate your contributions. Kim, thanks again for coming on. Melissa. Thanks.
No, that's okay. I'm used to that too. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.